Last week, the Lions played all their quarterbacks, and my Tabby Cats came through. This is Placed on the 55, a weekly podcast focusing on sports betting in the CFL. Welcome back to Placed on the 55 with Jon and Jess. We're heading into week 16, coming out of week 15. Another tough week, Jess. 0-3. 0-3. What do you say?
I know it's either I'm up or down after going 4-0 last week and then going 0-3 this week. I feel out there it's a cat world out there, John, and I'm wearing catnip underwear.
Well, you actually went 0-4 and then 4-0 and then 0-3.
3 games last week, so I only lost 3 games.
I know. It's unfortunate. If we had one more, you could have come out like 1-3 or something. But yeah, only 3 last week. I finished 1-2. The Tabby Cats came through for me. That leaves me on the season now at 31-28.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got you sitting at 26-33.
I was going to ask you to read those numbers for me because I'm too embarrassed to read them myself.
We don't have a lot of weeks left for you to climb out of that big hole.
I'm crapping the bed.
Do you remember last week when you said...
hopefully they're not 3 blowouts this week.
You and I both saw all 3 games as like surefire winners, no upsets. And when you had said that, I thought to myself, man, I should change my bets.
Oh, yeah. Just to go against me again? That didn't work out for you last time you did that. The Toronto at BC game, Nathan got pulled at halftime, and then VA came in. I kind of have heard that was sort of the plan, like the entire time, that no matter what happened, Nathan was starting the first half and VA was starting the second half. At the very end of the first half, when Nathan ran the freaking ball into the end zone himself on a very impressive drive, they had a lot of momentum. You know, if it was Campbell's thought that, we're going to play VA in the second half, you got to be able to, check that and balance it out and be like, okay, wait a minute, Nathan's looking super awesome. Why don't we just play him for a couple more series in the, in the third quarter and then see what happens? And if Nathan keeps winning, then I'm sorry, Vernon, you're still riding the pine.
When VA came in to start the second half, I didn't mind it, really. Nathan wasn't firing on all cylinders in that first half. He finished with a good play on the ground, but his passes were off. Hollins, have you heard any update on him? Is he out for a while? Because he had a big hit on the ground, maybe separated shoulder or something.
Haven't heard anything long term, but he's probably going to be out for at least a couple of weeks.
Nathan aired it out, put him in a difficult position. He almost caught the ball, but really couldn't survive the ground. The thing with that decision is, the coach and the owner, they apparently talked to VA saying, hey, if we bring in Nathan, this is still your team. You want to be a part of it. So the coach almost had like a commitment to honor his word prior to the game and put him in for the second half.
Sort of. I don't think they ever actually said, this is still your team. They said probably we want you to be a part of our team. Vernon Adams has got to know that Nathan's going to get all the starts. He's the highest paid player in the league.
It's not Vernon's team, but it was the coach's commitment to put Vernon in. At the end of the day, all 3 quarterbacks ended up playing in that game because it was so out of hand by the end of the fourth that they put in their third string.
Yeah, to give him some reps. Yeah, I know.
Sure. No, it's because the coach saw that it was out of hand, and why put 2 of his top pieces of talent on the field and risk injury. Kelly looked okay. The Lions didn't do themselves any favor. The score 33-17 in the end, it's better than it should be.
Better isn't how. I think the Argos should have pounded them by more.
They could have, but I just think BC got a couple points in garbage time and maybe the Argos let up. Defense took a couple plays off and all of a sudden they get a 7-point play.
Well, and like you said, now then the Lions are putting in the third string quarterbacks. So what does that tell you? They've resigned to the fact that they probably aren't going to win the game. So, put in the third stringer. That's the kind of reps you need for a third stringer because who knows what happens in the playoffs. Let's say Rourke gets injured and then VA's in there and something happens to him. Well, wouldn't it be nice if the third stringer had some reps with the team?
Yeah. Well, the Lions are on a bye, so that's enough talk about the Lions. But this isn't a Lions podcast. It's CFL.
But we love the Lions. Well, I love the CFL. I'll talk about the CFL all day long. We don't have to talk about Lions, but sure.
That brings us to Saturday. We had Hamilton and Ottawa. Ottawa went into Hamilton. Again, on the surface, this looked like a surefire win for Ottawa, and they ended up coming away with a loss by 16 points. Mr. Bo Levi Mitchell, Mr. Labor Day himself, he had a little juice left over from Labor Day and got another win in this game.
He looked good. I have to admit that. and I lost that one, obviously. But I like Bo Levi as a Canadian Football League ambassador. He's always spoke well about the league, and I hope he does well in Hamilton and get those crappy tappies out of the basement. I'm not really sure they're going to do that. At least I enjoyed seeing Bo Levi, have a good game last week.
Do you think they could end up with enough points to cross over? Because if Calgary and Edmonton finish at the bottom of the West, they could have a good enough record to be that 6th seed on the crossover.
Well, it is possible. Traditionally, in the past, if any team crosses over, it's almost always been a team from the West Division that crosses over to the East. I can't remember any time, at least in my CFL experience, I'm sure it's probably happened once or twice, where a team from the East has crossed over to the West. But in my experience in the last 15, 20 years, it always seems like there's a team from the West that's gone out, including BC. And it's amazing. Like the team from the West that does the crossover, they lose like 90% of the time. It's remarkable. I remember BC going out there and losing at least 2 games in different years for teams that they had better records against.
Okay, so the crossover may not be like the WNBA, where it's the top 8 teams, in this case the top 6 in the CFL, get into the playoffs.
How the crossover works is so the top 3 teams on each side are supposed to make the playoff. But let's say, and it usually happens in the East, that say Montreal is first in the division, and then Toronto is second, and then Ottawa and Hamilton are so shitty that a team like Saskatchewan, that might be 4th in the West, has a better record, and then they sneak over and play in the crossover game. Remember, with the crossover, if you're tied, like if you're 8-8, and even if you have the tiebreaker, it doesn't matter. Tiebreaker's out the window. If you have to be 10-8 versus 8-10.
So maybe it's not going to happen, but we'll keep an eye on that as the season plays out.
Certainly could happen. Absolutely.
Last game of the weekend was Montreal and Calgary. And Calgary, in my opinion, did everything they could to lose that game. And at the end of the day, the best they could come away with was a tie.
I can't believe that we've had now 2 ties this year in the CFL, which is extremely rare. I think we both kind of lost that game because we took the L's with, they were giving up points. The fact that they tied it up, I don't know. Good on Dickinson, I guess, but I don't like ties in the CFL. I wish they played out a little bit longer.
Well, the NFL has somewhat copied the CFL blueprint on that now with their overtimes also. So that was week 15. I went 1-2. The Tabbies came through, and you went 0-3, and we missed a few of those picks.
Yeah, a combined 1-5. So yeah, not good.
Let's see how we do coming up here in week 16. Friday, we've got the first game of the weekend, and that's going to be Hamilton heading into Toronto. Hamilton looks to rise above the Boatmen in the Eastern Conference. What are you seeing here?
Toronto, I can't get a handle on Toronto. I don't get how they started out the season 4-0. They get back the best player in the league, and then they've been biting it. And now they're just under a touchdown favorites.
What is the spread on this one?
6.5. Toronto's favored, and the home team advantage in Toronto doesn't mean crap. So I don't really care about that too much. But I gotta think that Chad Kelly and his group are going to get it together and beat the Tabbies, who are most likely going to finish in 4th place in the East. I'm taking the Boatmen to beat the Tabbies by that 6.5 points.
Yeah, I'm on the opposite side, of course. It's the Tabbies. I got to bet on them, and I'm certainly going to take all those points. That's a ton of points on the Tabbies. They could still lose by a couple field goals, and I'm going to win that bet.
Yeah, and I had some confidence in Chad Kelly coming back, and he's looked not that great. He looked better last week, but still, he doesn't look like he's going to win the MVP this year.
Second game on Friday night, a doubleheader. 2 okay records, 5-7-1 Saskatchewan, heading into 4-8-1 Calgary. I think it's going to be a rough ride for Calgary this weekend. How about you?
Oh, definitely. Saskatchewan's only favored by 2.5 points. I love Dave Dickinson, but I'm taking the Rough Riders for sure.
Yeah, I see 4-9-1 coming Calgary's way. What if there was another tie? So 4-8-2?
That would be crazy. And if that happened, it would only happen in the Canadian Football League.
I wonder if we could find the stat and find out like what team finished a season with the greatest number of ties and how many was that.
Yeah, it would be no more than two.
And less games each week historically as well. Like I'm sure nowadays the number of weeks that they play is got to be greater than it was back in 1960 or 80, right?
When I started watching the CFL, they'd always played 18 games, and that was started out with an 8-team league. When they went to the 9-team league, the schedule was really messed up, and they eventually said, all right, screw it.
During the expansion days of those U.S. teams, there must have been, what, a dozen teams in the CFL?
In the last season, in the 94 Grey Cup, Baltimore was at BC, at BC Place. I was there with my dad. Yeah. It was such a good, like, back and forth thing that the CFL just on a whim changed the divisions up. So there was going to be 8 teams, and they changed the division. So it's not like East and West anymore. It became North and South. 8 Canadian teams in the CFL and 5 American teams in the CFL. It resulted in Baltimore coming out of the American division to play Calgary's or Doug Flutie's Calgary Stampeders in Regina. But it was a bullshit kind of move because the schedule was unbalanced and the players were unbalanced. Another thing about the CFL is that at the time, and they still do, they have what they call a Canadian content rule. At the time, 20 players out of your 37 had to be Canadian-born players. It's now been brought back to 17 players out of the same 34. When the American teams got brought into the CFL kind of overlooked that. It became a constitutional challenge from the United States saying, you can't restrict our American-born players to play here. And they ruled the Canadian content rule down there was unconstitutional, and therefore all the American teams in the CFL played with 100% American players. And what was cool in 94 is that the Lions, with all their Canadian people, against the Baltimore Stallions with all their American people, the BC Lions won that game.
Amazing. I didn't know all the constitutional business. Very interesting.
Another little crazy little stat about that. I remember when they first started selling season tickets to the Baltimore, well, they were calling them the Colts at the time, but turned into this Baltimore CFLers. People were calling up the season ticket line going, yeah, I'd love to get some season tickets. Great. Where would you like to sit? And, you know, the client would be, I want to sit on the 50-yard line. And the Baltimore person would be like, no problem. Well, which 50-yard line would you like to sit on? And the customer would go, oh, no, on the Baltimore side. No problem. But still, which 50-yard line do you want to sit on?
And that's why we're placed on the 55.
You got it. Yep.
We hinted about this game last week in the podcast as a possible Eastern Conference final. Ottawa's hosting Montreal at home. They've had a lights-out record at home, undefeated.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Montreal going to finally give them their first loss at home?
Yeah, and Montreal's favored just by 2.5.
It's a tough game, right?
Yeah, I have an inkling I'm going for Ottawa. I'm not sure what's going on with Fajardo, but Ottawa's look so impressive. Like you said, they haven't lost at home yet, and they're, they get 2.5 free points. That's a sketchy one. I'm going to go with the Ottawas. So
the Alouettes would love nothing more than to go into that TD Stadium and give Ottawa a loss.
Well, don't you think the Ottawas are thinking the same thing? We're at home, and we're like, yeah, sure, we might finish in second, but we're going to mop up the floor with you on Saturday, and then, you know what? We're not going to be scared about you in the Eastern Final.
Yeah, it's possible. If Ottawa wins, they're going to be 9-4-1, and then Montreal's just 10-3-1. So that gap between the two, it's pretty small.
Yeah, they're not that far apart. Very surprisingly, compared to Montreal was 9-1 not too long ago, and Ottawa was kind of kicking around at 5 or 5, not maybe 5-4, but 6-3, which was kind of surprising. But they kept it going. Yeah, I don't know. You have to take a chance here and there, and I'm going with the Ottawas.
I agree. It's a tough game, a tough call. I think Montreal's going to cover, though. So I'm going to say Montreal. Final game of the week, the Bombers, who have somewhat resurrected their season. They're sitting 7-6 heading into Edmonton. Edmonton, they're climbing out of the basement. I don't know how much farther they're going to climb. Are they going to leapfrog Winnipeg? They could. In order to do that, they got to win this game. Regardless of how many points they're getting or giving, I'm just going to say Edmonton on this one. And hey, if they're getting points, it's a bonus for me. But I really believe in Edmonton this week.
Oh my goodness! Like your love of the Edmontons is right up there with the Tabbies. The Bombers, after starting like 0-4, have been on a tear since then. But it gets down to it, it gets down to coaching. I really like Mike O'Shea's group, even though I love Jarius Jackson and G. Roy Simon. But like I said a couple of weeks ago, unless Jarius is throwing a pass to G. Roy, I don't like the Edmontons too much. Bombers are only favored by 2.5 points. And I think, the Bombers are going to be first or second in the West, and Edmonton would be lucky to be third. They're going to fight it up with Saskatchewan, I still believe. That's it. That's all the story wrote, I think, for the Elks. And they'd be damn lucky to come in third by the way they started out the season.
Yeah, they would. And I think this is a little piece that they need to get up into that third spot. So, okay, well, I'm getting points on that game. That's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
It's week 16. We'll see how the records end up going into week 17. We're close to the end here. We only got a number of weeks left, like a month to go. And then we're into the playoffs. If you want to rate the show, you can. It's placed on the 55pod@gmail.com. Jess, I'm pulling for you this week. I really hope to see you get a couple wins under your belt. We'll talk to you next week.
You got it.